You'll notice some patterns here that might remind you of typical sales or consulting frameworks, but I've adapted them to the world of AI automation because, yes, we need to talk about the unique concerns that come with implementing cutting edge solutions in real world businesses. I've broken it down into actionable steps, but I'll weave in stories and little kind of side by side anecdotes just to keep things real and based on my experience. By the end of this, you should have more than enough detail to confidently run your own calls and with practice, start landing big clients who are happy to pay you top dollar for your expertise. The first foundational pillar of this approach is the key mindset shift that you're not just a tech person, you are a transformational partner. To contextualize that, let me just jump in with a quick story. A while back, I remember doing this discovery call with a potential client who owned a niche e-com store. And they had heard about AI automation, but they had no real idea how it worked. And they just kept repeating, we want a chatbot, we want a chatbot. Now, if I had approached that conversation like a typical tech contractor, just quoting a price to build out and implement a chatbot and integrate it with some like basic Q&A and RAG infra, I would have missed a massive opportunity. Instead, I treated myself like a strategic partner in their business. I imagined that I was an owner and operator of their shop. I asked about their bigger picture sales funnels and their profit margins and the amount of time that they were losing on customer support and all of the different verticals that comprised their business. And it turns out that the real gold was actually in automating their back-end fulfillment and shipping notifications. That's where they were losing money. That was the growth constraint that was actually holding them back. It was these unhappy customers that were complaining and leaving negative reviews and refunding on late shipments. And on the other side of that, they were wasting so many staff hours. So by stepping into the shoes of the CEO, just for the purpose of ideating around their business in this kind of holistic way, I was able to pitch a solution that incorporated AI-driven workflows and automations, and I ended up charging far more than I initially would have thought possible. And the lesson here is just don't look to sell a one-off tool. And beyond that, sometimes the client doesn't actually know what it is that they're looking for because they don't have a working conception of tech. So with that, what we want to be doing is selling the transformation that the tools we're building ultimately provide. People will happily pay for transformations that significantly increase their bottom line or drastically reduce their operational headaches. And once you adopt this mindset, your approach to prospecting just changes entirely. Now, the second key concept of this approach is preparing for the call. Don't just wing it. I get it that sometimes you just want to hop on a Zoom and say, hey, let's chat about your needs. And then you just expect to figure it out on the fly. I've been there and I'm guilty of doing this before too. The problem is if you don't do a little digging beforehand, you miss out on a really valuable opportunity to just backfill some context about their business that can make or break your ability to sell a high ticket retainer or package. Just do a little bit of light research before you get on that call. Like the payoff and reward on the other side is so meaningful. You can easily justify 15 or 20 minutes of exploration, just glancing through their website, looking them up on LinkedIn, trying to just sort of anticipate the business challenges that they may be facing, the growth constraints that they're up against, the goals that they may have. Just check out any relevant social posts, articles, customer complaints, like questions that they're getting, like that type of stuff is absolute gold. And I know all of this might feel a little bit obvious, but trust me, the number of consultants who skip this step is absolutely huge. And it shows on the call. Like a business owner can feel it when you're disconnected or you're just reading through like a generic script or going through a bunch of questions, just not referencing any specifics or ideating in a critical way. When you're aiming for these high ticket relationships, like that's not going to cut it. So remember, you really want to have just a couple of ideas. It doesn't have to be like a full-blown pitch deck, but write down a few bullet points about where you suspect you could build automations that help them. For instance, if you see that they have a contact form that leads to a manual email process on their landing page, you might highlight an AI-driven follow-up system or lead qualification workflow. If you notice that they have an online store with a complicated return policy, maybe they just need a robust AI agent that handles customer service inquiries automatically. These bullet points are just intended to be conversation starters and little things that you can sprinkle into a conversation. It's not a final prescription, right? You'll refine them once you actually hear more about that client's business and the way that they're operating day to day. Now, the third key tenet to this approach is how you open the call. You want to set the pace and provide real context as to who you are and what you do. So, when you hop on a Zoom or a Google Meet or a Skype or whatever tool that you're using, you're there and they're there. And this is your moment to establish who you are, why you're different, and at the same time, make them feel comfortable. I like to build a little rapport, and maybe I'll open a call with something like, "Hey, thanks for taking the time to chat. I've been looking forward to hearing more about your business, specifically some of the processes you have going on behind the scenes. I've got a few ideas on how AI and automation might be able to streamline things, but I'd love to hear from your firsthand perspective about where you feel like you're experiencing bottlenecks." And honestly, sometimes before I even get to that point, I will share a little bit about something that I read earlier in the day. Maybe DeepSeek just came out, and I'm sharing just my thoughts around how they were able to, train their model on a limited number of GPUs, or really anything that establishes me as a domain expert. Now, regardless, notice what I did initially. I started by acknowledging their time, right? People like to know that you respect their schedule. And then from there, I placed focus on them. So instead of diving into a monologue, I went and asked them specifically just about their needs. And then from there, I casually referenced my AI and automation expertise. I didn't say I'm the best in the world. I just hinted that I've thought about their processes. And you can just think about this practically, because before the call, you did some research. You already have maybe an inkling of their world, but giving them the chance to talk ensures that they feel heard. And it also ensures that what you imagine their problems might be actually aligns with reality. Sometimes clients mention a pain point that you probably didn't even consider, and that can be your golden ticket to offering a more valuable solution. Closing these deals is so much just about scoping projects. And that leads us to the fourth key concept of our approach, which is getting them to reveal their goals and pain points. During this portion, your role is to ask targeted questions and just listen, like truly listen. Think of it like being a detective on a high stakes case. You need to identify the specific areas where they're losing time, wasting money, or doing both. Some example questions that I might use to kind of prod at them and find where these pain points exist is, what's the main thing you wish you could automate right now if I was a wizard and I had a silly hat and a magic wand? Or I'll ask them, can you walk me through the typical path that takes a lead and converts them to a customer? And then what does your fulfillment look like from there? The difference between a meh conversation and a lucrative discovery call is just in how deep you go. Don't settle for surface answers. If they say, we just spend too long dealing with client onboarding, ask them to break down every single step of that onboarding, right? Tell them, hey, you're sitting down at your desk with a cup of coffee and you're opening up your browser. Like, what is the first screen that you see? And then from there, what are you clicking on? Where are you going from there? What are you copy and pasting? Where do you feel like you're doing things that are just creating unnecessary friction that could reasonably be automated? If they say something like, oh, we're just drowning in customer support emails, find out how many emails they actually receive per day and what categories those emails fall into and how much staff time is spent answering them and so on. And a pro tip, if they hesitate or they can't articulate details, offer gentle prompts. Just something like, do you find yourself responding to a lot of the same questions about shipping or refunds? Or are you noticing that leads who aren't followed up with in 24 hours end up ghosting you? The more specifics you can uncover, the easier it is to scope a project where the ROI is immediately clear and then present a solution that is ultimately going to be high impact in whatever area you guys have collaboratively defined. And now from here, the fifth pillar of our approach is ROI focused projects that practically sell themselves. So at this point, you've gathered enough information that you can start to connect the dots. If they mention that they think they lose about 10 hours a week doing some repetitive admin task, you can do a rough calculation of what that's costing them, either in labor or opportunity costs. Here's another way to think of it. Maybe we're talking to a business and they share that their average revenue per client is around $2,000, but they're letting leads slip through the cracks because they're just not following up quickly enough. That's quantifiable, right? We can calculate the amount of money that they are losing. And people don't buy high ticket solutions because they're looking for shiny new toys. Maybe sometimes they do, but that's just not the point. They buy because they see a clear link to either making more money or saving a significant amount of time, which in turn helps them generate more money. So you want to highlight that correlation in your conversation in a casual, comfortable tone. You might say something like, from what you're describing, it seems like you've got a serious backlog in support requests. And each day that you're not answering them quickly, your brand reputation is at risk. Have you thought about what that might be costing in lost sales or negative reviews? And let them answer. Often they'll go, yeah, it's probably costing a lot, but they haven't done the math. And so you can gently nudge them. You might say something like, let's be conservative. Even if it's just an extra $500 to $1,000 a month in lost revenue or refunds, that still adds up to $6,000, maybe even $12,000 a year that you're leaving on the table. I think we could build an AI driven workflow that would plug that gap and handle these inquiries in real time. See how we're framing our solution not as an expense, but as an investment with a real return. In this moment, you're not just positioning yourself as like a random consultant. They're now looking at you as a problem solver who's coming in and saving the day and creating more value than the cost of your services, which is a dynamic that net net is going to leave them walking away with profit dollars in their pocket. That's the power of scoping projects that generate a real return. Now, the sixth core concept of our approach is painting a picture of the future. And this is where we share the concept of immediate wins versus bigger outcomes. So, one of my favorite ways to stand out is to let the prospect envision how their day to day will look once we've implemented the automations that we're there to put in place. Even if they can't fully grasp how AI or whatever behind the scenes logic works, they can picture the results. And so, what I like to do is just generate quick wins early. Everyone loves immediate gratification, right? So I talk about the short-term benefits, like you'll see a noticeable reduction in repetitive tasks within the first months of our retainer. And your inbound leads will start getting responses automatically, which should lead to a quick improvement in your close rates. This is the type of stuff that the business operator you're talking to knows that they should be doing, but they otherwise just haven't had the bandwidth to actually put these systems in place. And so most of the time, they're just going to turn around and say, like, yeah, I agree. I really believe that this stuff is going to work. And I'm really confident that we'll see an immediate impact. It can be tempting to promise the moon to a client in order to get a deal across the finish line, but just honestly be real. Like stay honest with what you can deliver in a short time frame. I promise that if you're good at what you do, you can create very real transformation in this like compressed time frame. Now, even though we're kind of over indexing on short-term wins when we first kick off in order to build lots of goodwill in the relationship with the client, we don't want to ignore the long-term strategic growth potential. And so this is where, after we've identified those quick wins, we can pivot to discussing our bigger vision. We might say to a client something like, imagine in 6 months, you've not only automated your customer service, but you've also integrated AI to handle billing and scheduling and follow-ups. That frees up your time to focus on building strategic partnerships or launching a new product line. And this is the real big picture payoff. It's not just about helping them do the day-to-day tasks faster. It's about enabling them to direct their energy toward higher level initiatives that can elevate and grow their entire business. Now, the seventh core concept to our approach is the reality check and managing expectations. Look, I love sitting there with a client and feeling their excitement about the kind of transformation that we can create. There's no way around it. It just feels good. But if you just keep telling them how amazing everything's going to be without addressing the actual timeline and possible technical bottlenecks and, all the other stuff that comprises fulfillment, you're setting yourself up for a painful experience later. So I always include a small reality check. You could say something along the lines of this: I want to be upfront. Building a robust AI driven workflow isn't an overnight job. We can absolutely automate your lead follow up in a couple of weeks if you're ready to move fast, but designing a fully integrated system that handles all of your support and billing might take a bit longer. The good news is once we've set up the core framework, you'll start seeing benefits right away. So even though we're de-risking, that's still music to a business owner's ears. They don't have to wait months for the first signs of progress, but they also understand that the bigger transformations require more time and more investment. And guess what? When you manage these expectations early, you're just paving the way for a smoother client relationship, one where they're not freaking out if everything isn't perfect in week one. Now, the eighth core piece of this approach is presenting your high ticket offer. So this is really the moment of truth. We've gone through the detective phase, the brainstorming phase, the future vision phase. Now it's time for the actual proposal. And this is when so many people freeze up, worrying that they're going to say something that sounds too salesy or scare the client away with a high number. Here's my approach: just keep it casual, keep it confident, and tie everything back to ROI. So summarize their pain points and goals by starting to recap. Based on everything that we've covered, you're dealing with ABC challenges, and you really want to achieve XYZ outcomes, right? Now, wait for them to affirm. That confirmation is crucial. It ensures that you're aligned on your actual objectives. And then you can present your outlined solution roadmap. So you don't need to go into every single detail or tool or piece of code that you plan on implementing. Just focus on the broad strokes. You can say something like this. So I'd like to build an AI-based lead nurture system that automatically segments incoming leads and triggers relevant follow-up messages. Then for your customer service backlog, we'll create an automated ticketing process with an AI chatbot that handles initial inquiries. And for invoicing, we'll set up an integration that sends out payment reminders and syncs with your accounting software. Beautiful. Now we want to establish the investment range. I'll usually say something like this. Given the scope, I see this as an ongoing monthly engagement in the range of, and then I'll present like X to Y. And I'll say to cover startup, implementation, and ongoing support. My team and I will be here every step of the way, making sure that everything runs smoothly and is continuously optimized. And remember, it's totally normal for the imposter syndrome to creep in here when we share a big number. If the number is really big, hold that silence for a beat and let them process. Resist the urge to immediately justify it with, but we can discount it, or we do freebies, or let the power of the solution that you scoped speak for itself. And now from here, it's really important that the next words out of your mouth focus on reinforcing the potential ROI. So right after you name your fee, circle back to that return on investment. Say something like, if we can recapture even 10 or 20% of those missed leads that you mentioned and handle half of your support tickets automatically, I think we're looking at a significant monthly return, potentially well above the cost of our retainer. Saying something along those lines reaffirms that you're not an expense line, you're a revenue generator and a cost saver. If they start to balk or mention budget concerns, you can always talk about a phased approach or a smaller pilot project that tackles their biggest pain points first. But if you've done your job well, many clients will just be really excited at this point. They'll see the direct line that we've spent this whole time setting up between your automation solution and the potential gains. Now, the ninth phase of our approach is just sealing the deal. And this is where we define next steps and set the expectations for our follow-up. So our final move on the call should be a clear ask and a clear next step. Don't leave it vague where you say something like, cool, I'll talk to you soon. And then they respond, great, let's circle back. And then you both disappear for a few weeks. Instead, say something like, I'd like to put together a quick plan that outlines timelines and deliverables more precisely. Let's pencil in a 15-minute check-in call next Tuesday to go over it. Does that work for you? I feel like this is such an underestimated hack. When we're building momentum like this and we're basically pinning down a time to talk to them next while we still have them on that initial call, it means that the chances that they show up and continue engaging in this sales cycle are twice as high, probably more, honestly. If they say something like they need more time, just define that, figure out how much more time. Again, it's okay to be firm but flexible. Some clients legitimately may need to consult their business partners or weigh finances. Like, that's totally normal. The key is just to stay in control of the follow-up process rather than leaving it entirely in their hands. Now, the last portion of our call is the conclusion. Okay, ultimately, I wanted to share all of this with you guys because my own journey has been filled with lots of trial and error. I've definitely made some mistakes, especially early on, like undercharging or lacking a structured process or forgetting to connect my automations and scope of works to real ROI. But each lesson learned helped me refine this method that I just shared. And now it is the backbone of how I confidently pitch and close and deliver on high ticket AI and automation projects. So go out and try all of this. I'm really confident that if you apply this approach, you will see results. Okay, guys, that's it for me. I hope you found this really valuable. I love making this kind of content, and I'll catch you soon. Good luck out there.